Last June, my boyfriend and I were living with our roommates and my two kids. Our roommates decided to leave and only give us 3 weeks' notice on a month-to-month lease. We were already planning on leaving ourselves in a couple of months, but with the short notice, we decided that we just had to find a place somewhere, anywhere. Luckily, we both work remotely, so we had the ability to move anywhere in the state. For 2 weeks, we searched every rental site on the internet that we could find. This eventually led us to Craigslist. Yeah, Craigslist. We had multiple rejections from landlords who weren't willing to work on deposit, which is understandable. However, one was open to the idea. She was a nice, older woman in the state, with an approved realtor profile. I googled her. The house was perfect. It was a side-by-side duplex, which would be fine for a little while. A cute little kitchen and a backyard. The crime rate didn't look too bad, and there was a school close by. She accepted large dogs, which was perfect, and the deposit wasn't too high. After some researching online and talking, we made arrangements to move into the home. When we left our old home, we took off to finally see our new humble abode. We dropped off the kids at my mom's, for safety's sake, and went on our way. The drive was awful. We were lost, left and right, and even nearly ended up in the wrong town. Eventually, we were able to find an ATM to pay for the rent and deposit. After getting lost, and yelling at one another on the freeway for another 45 minutes, in the middle of absolute nowhere, with limited reception and having to find a place to call her, we lost reception again, but we eventually found the gate where she met us to let us in. Something was immediately off. She seemed fidgety and nervous. She didn't look like her pictures. She kept wiping her nose with her sleeve, saying she was sick. She was a little older and maybe like she had been on drugs at some point. Or maybe still. We went through the gate and drove about a half mile down to her home. Apparently, her office was also her home. I didn't know that. The property was filled with old trucks, boats, and buses. It was like a graveyard for oversized vehicles. My boyfriend looked at me completely frustrated. In his failed attempt at humor, he blurted out, "Well, we're either going to get a house or we're going to die. Let's go find out." We parked and met with a woman outside. She seemed really anxious and was telling us random things about her many projects. I assumed tweaker. Sorry, but that's just what I assumed, and it's a common problem in that area. We went inside the house, which strangely was well decorated and very modern. The rest of the house was a little trashy. She claimed that our office was flooded and we'd just have to sign the paperwork here. We agreed. We signed the paperwork, but when we realized we were missing $200, my boyfriend felt secure enough to leave me alone, to go check the car to see if it was missing. She went on to tell me about the house and the arrangements. Random things. The key is by the light outside. They said there's a washer and a dryer in the garage below. We don't know anything about that, but you might not want to go in there. It might be kind of icky. They also said there's a crawl space where somebody can get in. I'm not sure what they're talking about, but just said to be careful and make sure it's okay. She was incredibly adamant about not having been at the home in quite some time. Okay, I realized that's the part where I should have definitely paid attention. But it was such a chaotic day, and I was so exhausted that I just said, okay, sure. I shrugged it off. I just wanted to get the hell home. My boyfriend came back inside. She said the missing amount was fine. We could just tack on the missing amount to the next month's rent. Perfect. We thanked her and were on our way, new lease in hand. We picked up the kids and drove another hour to the home. The entire drive we were watching the miles down to the town and counting down. 15 miles. 10 miles. 5 miles. Then, we arrived. It was an old 3-story building duplex. Not a 2-story, but a 3-story. The town was eerily depressing. Have you ever seen Gummo? It's a spitting image of Gummo. Actually, I lived in this same town as a kid with my dad sometimes. It was literally 1983. There were mullets and 1980s tank tops, children playing outside, while their meth-addicted parents smoked on the porches and chugged cheap redneck beer like water. It was hot, but the sky was dark and gray. Even the power lines were hanging down and about to fall. There were drug addicts walking around and small children playing outside. Other children played by themselves, running their bikes through the streets unsupervised. This was not Mayberry. That beautiful yard had grown into a jungle. This beautiful duplex was practically abandoned and nobody was living on the other side. My boyfriend and I looked at one another with a sense of dread. "Is this it?" I asked. "This is it. This is where we live now," he told me. He grabbed the key by the light and we walked into the house. It was worse. The floor was covered in water. The fridge had been leaking for a while and the power wasn't on yet. We called the company earlier that day and they said we would have to wait a week to turn it on. There was a cup of coffee left on the kitchen counter. I noticed the locks had been recently changed and the door had obviously been broken into several times. So much that the locks were completely useless. There was like this weird gap between the door and the frames. There was a horrible, horrible smell, like the stench of rotting flesh or something. My boyfriend went to grab the things while I watched the kids. I walked in the living room. The house had been painted that day. It was roasting outside, and the smell between the paint, the smell of the mold, and overwhelming smell of death. I had to open a window. I tried. He tried. The windows were broken and painted shut. This place was a train wreck. The pictures online had to have been from a few years ago. Whoever painted the house painted quickly and got the hell out of there. It was poorly done. Even the door frames were painted. They painted the walls, ceiling, the banisters, and even the stairs this ugly, depressing salmon pink color. That instantly set me off. "I think there was blood in here," I told my boyfriend. "Why do you say that?" he asked, dropping down more boxes onto the floor. "That's the only reason to paint it this god-awful color. Blood will seep through white paint, eventually, and it's impossible to get rid of. The only reason I know this is because I remember hearing about a news story where a woman took over a murder house. As I walked further into the living room, I realized there was a huge bleach stain, about 2 feet wide on the dark carpet. The house was lifted so high with the garage or basement, whatever it was, below. I didn't understand how it could feel like it had been flooded or why the carpet was so badly wrinkled. We scoped out the house and went upstairs to the bedrooms. The windows were so low to the ground and hanging open, and I just thought, this is not safe for kids. There was a bucket of paint with a paint roller still inside, randomly left behind in what would have been our bedroom. I stood by the window, which was only about maybe 2 feet high. It must have been about 4 feet tall, 3 feet wide, no guards, and was completely left open. There wasn't even a screen. I could have sworn I saw a flash of light while staring down 3 stories below from the death trap. Call it whatever you want, but I instantly had a vision of a woman with long hair falling out the window and crashing down on the ground below. I didn't tell my boyfriend. I had to get out from upstairs and just took the kids. About 10 minutes later, that smell of death was making it impossible for me to breathe. I had to go to the bathroom. We had been driving for hours that day, but the moment I stepped in, I noticed that the mirrored bathroom cabinets were cracked, left open, and the toilet paper holder shoved inside in parts. I walked in a little more, and I noticed the red spots on the shower walls, and a sealed tampon in the middle of the floor. I don't think the maintenance man had any use for a tampon, and it looked as though someone had gotten the hell out of there and did so quickly. I was about to go in, but something held me back, and a little voice in my head said, "Don't go into the bathroom." So I didn't. My boyfriend was sitting in the car. He said it was too hot and he needed some air. I looked down below, out the living room window, and noticed that there were groups of people walking by, making comments about someone being in the house. Those people being us. I was trying to come up with every positive reason to stay here. I kept coming up with excuses like, it's not so bad. Maybe it just needs a woman's touch. Maybe some flowers will make it better. Maybe some air freshener. Maybe like 10 bottles of air freshener and a lot of bleach. I kept trying to convince myself by looking around and thinking how to make it work. I opened up the closet and then peeked inside to see that it led further down behind the wall. Keep in mind this house was probably built in the very early 1900s and is around 100 years old, if not more. It wasn't uncommon back then for secret rooms or passageways to exist. It's so hard to explain the feeling I had, but as I was about to peek inside to see the back of the closet, something came over me. I knew that if I had gone any further, my kids and I wouldn't be alive. Everything felt so heavy and I was about to throw up. This was the closest I had ever felt in my entire life to not just death, but hell, pure evil. I can't even possibly explain the amount of dread and discomfort. I was so uncomfortable. My son, who is always positive, came closer, excited and shouting, "Is that another room?" I full-on went pissed off mother bear, pushed him away and closed the door. Suddenly, the words that the landlord told me ran through my head again. They said there's a crawl space where someone could get in. Just then, I heard something else in the house. Something like someone moving around, somewhere around behind that closet area. I stood there for a moment and I had that eerie thought creep into my head. You're all going to die if you stay here. That very thought set me into a panic, and with my heart pounding, I quickly grabbed my kids and ran out to the car. I could tell that my boyfriend was visibly upset with the home, giving me an opportunity to skip beating around the bush. "Hey, let's just go," I told him. I was a little bit hysterical, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was on the lines of, "It will be fine. We will find something. We don't belong here. We need to get the fuck out. Let's just go. I don't care. I'm not mad. Let's just fucking go." He was relieved. Neither of us wanted to disappoint the other, but after talking things through, it turned out that we had the same feeling of dread and death in us. He was just as afraid of dying as I was. I was absolutely positive that one night there would have killed us. I asked him to take pictures so that the landlord would know the situation. As we were leaving, we noticed that there was actually another window on our side of the duplex, which we believe was a secret room. I heard the neighbors across the street laughing and saying things like, "It looks like they're leaving. That didn't last long." We slept in the car at a nearby gas station. We were so exhausted. I cried, of course, and then called my mom to see if we could stay the night, but would have to wait until early in the morning. My boyfriend did his best to comfort me, and we explained to the landlord that we didn't move in, that we had taken pictures and there were multiple health code violations. We would send them if she needed them. She didn't even hesitate or want to see the photos, and within minutes offered to write a check for our money back. I swear there was someone else in that house. It still terrifies me to talk about it, and I will never rant sight unseen again. And I'm sharing this story because you shouldn't either. By the way, that's not the end. That feeling haunted me for weeks, so much I couldn't sleep. Even my dreams were haunting me with the image of that woman falling out of the window. I eventually Googled the address to find out who had lived there before us. I found a woman's name. I Googled that woman's name, and she's dead. She was beaten to death with a baseball bat, apparently stabbed, allegedly by her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend. They stuffed the body in a car for weeks, after hiding it in a garage, and it was found a couple of hours away. I don't believe that the news story says that the murder took place in that house. I don't even know, but it still feels like it was somehow involved, or something else happened. I'm not sure. I just know one thing. Someone is hiding something, and I definitely believe that someone else was in that house.